The mirror in the fog. In the hills above the village, where the wind drifts like forgotten breath, there lies a trail that no longer appears on maps. Overgrown and silvered with dew, it leads to a cottage that leans gently to one side, as though it's tired from waiting so long. No one remembers who lived there. But the mirror still does. Elsa came to the hills in search of silence. After years in the city, its endless lights and rushing noise, she wanted only the hush of mist and the slow rhythm of raindrops on old roofs. The caretaker had warned her that the cottage was remote, old-fashioned, and lacked electricity. That the place had a certain stillness to it. That's what drew her in. It felt like stepping out of time. The cottage was smaller than she imagined, nestled among ash trees and woven with ivy. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender and dust. The floorboards creaked softly with every step, but the walls held warmth. There was only one bedroom. And in it, a tall mirror. Its frame was carved with unfamiliar shapes, like waves, or vines, or maybe something deeper. The glass was unclouded, though the silver inside had dulled in places. Still, it reflected clearly. Except at night. The first night, Elsa lit a candle and sat beside the mirror. Outside, the fog had rolled in thick. It swallowed the trees and softened the moon until the whole world felt hushed and blurred. Her reflection in the glass flickered slightly, as if it moved a breath slower than she did. She leaned in. The flame behind her trembled. So did the mirror. And then it was still again. She told herself it was the candlelight playing tricks. That old mirrors sometimes behaved strangely. She drew the curtains, blew out the flame, and curled beneath the blankets, her mind heavy with fog. But her dreams were sharp. In them, she stood in the same room, but the mirror was taller. Wider. And behind the glass, her reflection turned away, stepping into a place she could not see. Each day, the fog remained. It hung low in the hollows and drifted through the trees like something searching. Even in the afternoon, the light struggled to reach through it. Elsa began to write again, small poems, fragments of memory. She read by candlelight and listened to the wind pressing gently against the walls. But the mirror began to change. It showed corners of the room that didn't exist. A bookshelf where there was none. A window with the wrong curtains. And sometimes, she saw herself asleep in the bed when she was wide awake. She moved the mirror to the corner. Turned it toward the wall. But the dreams continued. They were soft, never frightening. But strange. Always the same room, but colder. Always the same mirror, but deeper. Sometimes she heard footsteps behind her in the dream. Other times, breathing. She began to leave notes for herself on the nightstand. Little reminders, you are here. The mirror is just a mirror. You are awake. She always found the notes in the morning. But once, they were written in different handwriting. The villagers down the hill were kind, but distant. When she asked about the cottage, they looked away. One old man at the bakery said, there used to be a woman there who stared too long at her own face. Mirrors aren't meant to hold that much attention. She laughed softly. He didn't. One evening, the fog grew so thick it crept beneath the door. Elsa sat by the window, watching it curl along the floor like smoke. The mirror, still turned to the wall, gave off a faint hum, not sound, but something she felt in her chest. She turned it around. And this time, her reflection did not move. It stared at her, same eyes, same face, but still. The room in the glass was darker. The candle on the table flickered slower. And when she leaned in to look closer, her reflection smiled faintly. Not unkindly. Just knowingly. Elsa stepped back. The glass rippled. Only once. She tried to sleep, but the room felt unfamiliar now. The floor creaked in patterns she hadn't noticed before. The mirror seemed to glow faintly, even with the candle out. In her dream that night, the room was upside down. The ceiling held the floor. And the mirror was a doorway, not a surface. She watched herself walk through it. But she did not follow. In the morning, everything was normal again. The mirror reflected her perfectly. The room was quiet. The wind whispered only in the trees. Still, she packed a small bag. Just in case. But she didn't leave. The last night, the fog was so dense she could barely see the trees outside. The mirror shimmered faintly in the dark, drawing her gaze like a flame draws a moth. She sat before it, once more. And the reflection was already there, waiting. It reached out, not fast, not slow, just steady. And so did she. Their fingers met at the glass. It was cool. Then warm. Then gone. The cottage remains in the hills. Still leaning gently to one side. Still surrounded by silver fog. And in the bedroom, the mirror stands. If you stay long enough, it begins to remember. If you sit quietly, it might show you a different version of the room. And if you look close enough, you may see someone else staring back. The house that watches. There was a house at the edge of the forest, where the road turned to gravel and the trees leaned inward like they were whispering secrets to one another. It wasn't abandoned, exactly. The paint had peeled, the windows were dusty, and the porch sagged in the middle, but it still felt lived in. Or rather, it still noticed things. Marla arrived just before the first frost. She had rented the place for a month. The listing said secluded writing cabin, but it looked more like a forgotten farmhouse with its long eaves and iron weather vane creaking slowly in the wind. That was fine. She wanted quiet. Time to think, to finish the story she'd started but never dared to end. Inside, the house was still. The air held the scent of old cedar and something faintly sweet, like dried lavender, maybe, or something older. It was warmer than it should have been. As if it had been waiting for her. There was no electricity. Only oil lamps, thick quilts, and a small wood burning stove in the corner. She didn't mind. She liked how the shadows pooled in corners, how the silence stretched out like a cat in the sun. The first night, the wind picked up. It hissed through the trees and tapped at the window panes like it had fingers. Marla wrapped herself in a shawl and stared out into the dark. No lights. No roads. No sound except the breath of the forest and the quiet pop of the stove. The house creaked now and then. But not in a worrying way. It sounded attentive. She chose the upstairs bedroom, the one with the slanted ceiling and a single window facing the woods. There was an old mirror above the dresser, its surface faded at the edges, like memory slowly slipping away. A small porcelain pitcher rested beside the bed, filled with dried roses long past their prime. Before she slept, she lit the oil lamp and let her eyes wander the room. Everything looked normal. But she had the strange feeling she was being watched. Not from outside. From within the house. She dreamed of eyes. Not threatening. Not angry. Just watching. In the days that followed, she slipped into a rhythm. Wake at dawn. Make tea. Walk the narrow trails behind the house. Return to write for hours in the sitting room, wrapped in quiet. The words came easier now. Slower, but clearer. But sometimes, she felt the house breathing. A breeze without wind. A shift in warmth, as if someone had just left the room. A soft creak above her when she knew no one else was there. Once, she left her notebook on the desk and came back to find the pages turned gently, as if browsed. She told herself it was her imagination. Old houses creak. Drafts move things. Still, she began whispering thank you aloud when she finished writing for the day. It made the air feel a little less still. One night, she woke to the sound of a soft knock. Not at the door. But from inside the walls. A slow, deliberate tap, tap, tap. She lay in bed, listening, not afraid. Just curious. The knocking stopped after a minute. The room returned to silence. When she looked toward the mirror, she thought she saw someone standing behind her. But it was only her coat, hanging in the dim light. The next day, she found something odd in the attic. A small wooden chair, perfectly centered on the dusty floor, facing a boarded-up window. She hadn't noticed it when she first arrived. The chair was worn smooth, as if many had sat there over the years. A faint ring of marks circled it on the floor, scratches where it had been turned, again and again, always back to face the window. She left it there. Didn't move it. It didn't feel right to. The dreams deepened. She saw herself walking through the house, but it wasn't quite the same. Rooms were mirrored. Doors led to unfamiliar places. And always. She felt something behind her, watching, just out of sight. She began to speak to the house more often. Not full conversations. Just murmurs. Soft thanks. Gentle questions. Quiet reassurances. She didn't know why. It simply felt polite. One evening, during a heavy mist, she left a story unfinished. She'd written the beginning, a girl alone in a strange house, hearing things she couldn't explain, but she didn't know how it should end. She set the notebook down. Went for a walk. When she returned, the final page had something new. 6 words. She stayed, because it knew her. She didn't remember writing it. But the pen was still warm. The last night, the wind was silent. No creaks. No knocks. Just the deep stillness of something holding its breath. Marla stood in the hallway, watching the shadows stretch long and slow across the floor. She walked past the mirror, past the old photographs on the wall, down into the kitchen. There, she found a candle already lit. Waiting. She sat at the table, notebook open. The story had ended. The silence was complete. And for the first time, she felt the house settle, not around her, but with her. Like a cat curling beside its favorite person. Not lonely. Just quiet. When the caretaker returned a week later, the house was empty. No sign of struggle. No sign of departure. Just warmth. And the faint scent of lavender in the air. Sometimes now, when the fog rolls thick through the trees, travelers say they see a light in the upstairs window. A woman sitting at the desk, writing. Not moving. Not looking up. Just there. Still watched. Still watching.